it's Adelai, and if I say French Revolution, your mental image is probably students building barricades, fighting class differences, and maybe even singing a few songs. Well, you might be surprised to learn that those assumptions are not too far off. I am here at the University of Saint-Denis to tell you all about the Mai 68 protests, the current protests that are taking place, and how the two are connected.
Revolutions are a part of French student life, like football is to American student life. Whether it was the French Revolution 230 years ago, the Mai 68 social revolution 50 years ago, or the current major strikes going on throughout France, the students have always been at the center.
So despite its name, the Mai 68 protest actually got started on the 22nd of March at the University of Nanterre. Students were protesting the bureaucracy, which limited the funding, dictated the types of education, and also limited student enrollment. So I guess things haven't changed that much.
On May 2nd, the University of Nanterre was officially shut down.
On May 3rd, in solidarity with the students of Nanterre, students at La Sorbonne began protesting, and their university was subsequently shut down as well. May 6th, the National Student and Teachers Union called for protests against the occupation of La Sorbonne, and in response, 20,000 students and teachers flooded the streets heading towards the university. Subsequently, there was violence and many arrests, which further fueled the flame for future protests. On May 7th, the high school student union joined with the others for protests. Together, they issued 3 demands. 1, that the universities be reopened. 2, that the police leave the universities. And 3, that all students that were charged and imprisoned be released.
On May 10th, the barricades rose and conflicts between protesters and police grew increasingly violent. This harsh government reaction led to a surge of sympathy for the protesters, and on May 13th, a general protest took place with over 1 million people flooding the streets of Paris.
As soon as Prime Minister Pompidou reopened La Sorbonne, it was quickly occupied by students who declared it a university of the people.
Workers joined with students, striking at factories across France and bringing the economy to a relative halt. At its height, nearly 10 million people, or 2/3 of the workforce, were striking.
Things finally reached a precipice whenever President Charles de Gaulle fled the country for a moment. But it was not until his return that things finally settled down. With a state of emergency looming and the military having surrounded Paris, he ordered new elections to be held in a month and ordered the workers back to their jobs. After a celebratory parade down the Champs-Élysées, the workers returned to...
The protest inspired an era of social movements in France, such as the feminist movement and the socialist movement. In the aftermath of the protests, the university systems in Paris were radically changed. The second oldest academic institution in Europe, the University of Paris, also known as La Sorbonne, was disbanded, and 13 universities took up its mantle as the University of Paris system. 6 universities inherited the facilities of La Sorbonne in the Latin Quarter, but only 3 retained its name and educational legacy. The remaining 3 stuck their claim as new and independent institutions. The 7 other schools were scattered outside the city. This breaking up of schools was done to disperse the students outside of central Paris, where they had caused so much chaos in Mai 68.
This led to the formation of the University of Saint-Denis, which both satisfied the students' need for freedom, while also taking those crazy arts and humanities students and pushing them out of Paris proper. Soon after Open Harbor, radical students took over the university, leading to violent clashes with the police.
Since then, things have quieted down, with smaller protests taking place every few years, which finally leads us to the protests gripping the country today.
Beginning with institutions such as the University of Saint-Denis, Nanterre, and Sorbonne Nouvelle, student protesters blocked the facilities to both students and administrators. What is the cause of these protests? I've been asking this question all semester, but when I ask my French friends or my teachers, their response has always been "c'est trop français," and they are right. This is something that is inherently French. The motto of France is liberté, égalité, fraternité. And with that, the student revolutionaries are mostly concerned with equality. You see, currently in France, any student who passes the high school exit exam, the BAC, is guaranteed entrance into one of France's public institutions. But this has led to some major problems. You have the severe overcrowding of classes, a 60% dropout rate, and on top of it all, the students become more alienated from their education. The students believe that this goes against the heart of our society and believe they are fighting for their nation's very soul. While Macron is put in a difficult position where he has to fix this problem somehow. And so his solution has been to allow public universities to be more selective on their admission, taking in things like motivation or aptitude when selecting for students. The student protesters are not happy with this because they see it as an attack on their right to equality within this first system. The protests are scheduled to end midsummer, but neither side is budging.
If you are an international student at one of these universities and are confused or frustrated by the chaos of this semester, remember that for each side, this is about the core values of the nation. According to UNESCO, access to education is a human right important for social development, but each individual's education is their own responsibility. For the French students protesting, they are taking ownership of their education by attempting to protect this right. For you, ownership of your education while abroad may mean taking steps to ensure your educational experience abroad is a fruitful one, regardless of this. If you are affected by these or future protests, here are some things to keep in mind. Firstly, as a foreign national on visa, you do not have a right to protest, and you can have your visa revoked. Please be careful, please be safe, observe but do not participate. Secondly, communication with staff and faculty is key, especially if you want to get your grades at the end of the semester. Connect early and often if you see some sort of difficulty arising, and keep up with your work. Finally, regardless of situation, you should always empower your education by seeking out opportunities to learn outside of the classroom. Museums, libraries, and even these protests are a great way to expand your intellectual and cultural horizon. Education is never limited to the four walls of a classroom, and some of the most important lessons in life are learned when you tear down those walls.